I'm Dennis, 28 years old, the eldest son in a family that's run Crawford's restaurant for 3 generations. After quitting my law career, I poured everything into opening Flower and Heart Bakery. Today was our grand opening, and not a single family member showed up. I just found out they all attended my sister Rosie's promotion party instead. As I locked up alone, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "We need to discuss the bakery. If you're watching this video, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to follow my journey of pursuing passion despite family betrayal." Growing up as a Crawford meant one thing: restaurants were in our blood. My grandfather Thomas started Crawford's in the 70s, building it from a small diner into one of the most respected restaurants in Boston. My father William took over in the 90s, expanding it further with his business acumen and relentless work ethic. From the day I was born, everyone assumed I would be next in line to continue the Crawford legacy. "Dennis, one day all of this will be yours," Dad would say, sweeping his hand across the dining room during our Sunday family dinners. 20 years from now, people will still be coming to Crawford's for the best steak in town, and you'll be the one making sure of that. My mother Catherine, always elegant and poised, nodded alongside him. "The Crawford name means something in this town, Dennis. It's a responsibility as much as it is a privilege." I smiled and nodded, but deep down I had a different passion brewing. It started with my grandmother Eliza, who would let me help her bake on weekends when I was just 7 years old. While my father was showing Rosie and Jake how to greet customers properly, I was in Grandma Eliza's kitchen, learning how to make the perfect pie crust. "You have a gift, Dennis," she'd whisper as we worked the dough together. "Your hands know just how much pressure to apply. That's not something you can teach." But despite this early passion, I followed the path that was expected of me. I went to an excellent college, then law school, graduating near the top of my class. My parents were thrilled, seeing my law degree as the perfect foundation for eventually running the family business. They hung my diploma prominently in the restaurant's waiting area, a constant reminder of the future they had planned for me. I joined a prestigious law firm and spent 3 years drafting contracts, reviewing documents, and feeling my soul slowly drain away. The only joy I found was in my kitchen at night, baking to relieve stress. My apartment would fill with the aroma of fresh bread, cookies, and pastries that I would bring to the office the next day. My colleagues loved my baked goods, often joking that I had missed my calling. They didn't know how right they were. The turning point came during the firm's holiday party. The caterer had an emergency and canceled last minute. In a moment of either bravery or insanity, I volunteered to provide desserts for 60 people. I stayed up all night baking, creating an assortment of pastries that would make Grandma Eliza proud. The response was overwhelming. Partners who normally barely acknowledged me were asking for recipes. The managing partner, Harold Thompson, pulled me aside. "Crawford, I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've never tasted anything like this. If you ever decide to leave law, you'd have a hell of a career as a baker." His words echoed in my head for weeks afterward. I couldn't focus on my cases. Instead, I found myself sketching bakery layouts during meetings and researching small business loans during lunch breaks. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my family about my decision to leave law and open a bakery, the reaction was exactly as I feared. "You want to do what?" My father's voice boomed across our family dining table. "Throw away a law degree to sell cupcakes? Have you lost your mind, Dennis?" My mother tried to be more diplomatic, but landed in the same place. "Honey, baking is a wonderful hobby, but it's not a career for someone with your education and background." Only Jake, my younger brother by 4 years, showed any support. "I think it's cool, Dennis. You've always made amazing stuff." Dad shot him a silencing look before turning back to me. "What about the restaurant? What about the legacy we've built for you?" "Dad, Rosie is already working at Crawford's. She loves it there. She's much better suited to take over someday." My sister Rosie, 2 years younger than me and already the restaurant's assistant manager, smiled tightly. "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but Dad's right. This is impulsive, Dennis. You're having a quarter-life crisis." The argument lasted hours, with no resolution. I left that night knowing I had disappointed everyone, but also feeling more certain than ever about my decision. The next 8 months were a blur of preparation. I cashed out my savings, secured a small business loan, found the perfect location just 3 miles from Crawford's, and spent countless hours perfecting recipes. Through a culinary school connection, I met Alex, an experienced pastry chef who believed in my vision enough to come on board. "Most new food businesses fail," Alex warned during our first meeting, "but I've tasted your work, and you've got something special. I want to be part of it." With Alex's help, I developed a menu that balanced classic favorites with innovative creations. We tested recipes tirelessly, adjusting ingredients by tiny increments until everything was perfect. I spent weeks sourcing the best ingredients, finding local suppliers for flour, butter, eggs, and fruits. The space I found was perfect: a former bookstore with big windows, high ceilings, and enough room for both production and a cozy customer area. I painted the walls myself, a warm buttercream yellow that made the space feel sunny even on cloudy days. The sign outside Flower and Heart Bakery was hand-painted by a local artist. As opening day approached, I mailed beautiful invitations to every family member, including extended relatives. I called each of them personally to follow up. "It would mean the world to have you there," I told my parents. "Just to see what I've built." Mom sounded hesitant but promised they would try. Dad said nothing committal. Rosie mentioned being busy but would see what she could do. Jake was the only one who sounded genuinely enthusiastic. The night before the grand opening, I could barely sleep. This was it, my dream, about to become reality. Despite the tension with my family, I was hopeful they would show up and see that I had created something worthwhile. Maybe then they would understand why I had to do this. The alarm rang at 3 in the morning, though I had barely slept anyway. Opening day had arrived. I showered quickly, downing a cup of coffee before heading to the bakery. The streets were empty and dark, but my mind was racing with checklists and last-minute details. When I arrived, Alex was already there, prepping the kitchen. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" he asked, mixing batter for our signature morning buns. "Not a wink," I admitted, tying on my apron. "Let's make this the best opening day ever." For the next 4 hours, we worked in synchronized harmony. Fresh bread went into the ovens, pastry cream was prepared, tarts were assembled, and cookies were baked to perfect chewiness. The 2 new employees, Lily and Marcus, arrived at 6 to help with final preparations and learn the register system. At exactly 8 o'clock, I unlocked the front door, flipping the sign to open with a mixture of pride and terror. Would anyone come? Had I made a terrible mistake? 20 minutes later, the first customer walked in, a middle-aged woman on her way to work, who had noticed our sign the previous week. "I've been waiting for this place to open," she said, scanning the display case. "Everything looks amazing." She left with a coffee and 2 croissants, promising to return tomorrow. A small victory, but it felt enormous. By mid-morning, we had a steady stream of customers. Word seemed to be spreading, with people mentioning they had heard about us from friends or seen our social media posts. Each sale felt like validation, each compliment like fuel. Between customers, I kept checking my phone, looking toward the door every time the bell jingled. No sign of any family members. No calls, no texts asking where the bakery was located or if they could bring anything. At noon, during a brief lull, I called my mother. No answer. I texted my father, sister, and brother. Nothing. "They'll come," Alex assured me, noticing my distraction. "It's still early." I nodded, trying to focus on the customers who were actually there rather than the ones who weren't. A young couple raved about our lemon tarts. An elderly man said our sourdough reminded him of the bread his grandmother made. These moments should have been purely joyful, but each was tinged with the absence of the people whose opinions mattered most to me. By 3 in the afternoon, the initial rush had slowed. I had served dozens of customers, received numerous compliments, and even had a few people ask about placing future orders. By any objective measure, the opening was going well, but still, no family. At 4:30, Tony, a waiter from Crawford's who had always been kind to me, stopped by for a coffee. "Great place you've got here, Dennis," he said, looking around appreciatively. "Really impressive." "Thanks, Tony. How are things at the restaurant today?" I tried to sound casual. Tony's expression changed subtly. "Oh, it's busy." "You know, what's going on?" I pressed. He hesitated. "Look, I probably shouldn't say anything, but there's a big party at Crawford's right now. For Rosie. She got promoted to general manager." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my family not come to my opening, but they were all together celebrating Rosie. On the same day. At the same time. When was this planned? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Last week, I think. Your dad made a big announcement about it yesterday. After Tony left, I retreated to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. Alex found me there, staring blankly at the wall. Dennis? What happened? I explained what Tony had told me, the words bitter in my mouth. Those bastards, Alex muttered. I'm so sorry. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I went through the motions, serving customers with a smile that felt plastered on. By 6 o'clock, the initial opening day rush was over. We had sold almost everything, with just a few items left in the display cases. We did good, Lily said as she counted the register. Really good for a first day. I nodded, trying to feel the success through the hurt. Thanks for your help today, everyone. You were all amazing. After everyone left, I stayed behind to clean up and process the day. The bakery was quiet now, just the hum of the refrigerators breaking the silence. I wiped down counters that were already clean, reorganized supplies that didn't need reorganizing. As I was about to lock up, my phone buzzed with a text. Finally, I thought. Someone remembered. It was from my father. We need to discuss the bakery. No congratulations. No explanation for their absence. Just a summons disguised as a conversation. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked to my car alone. The most important day of my professional life, ending not with celebration, but with silence. The next evening, I arrived at Crawford's for the discussion my father had requested. The restaurant was busy as usual for a weeknight, the dining room filled with the comfortable hum of conversation and the clink of silverware against plates. Several servers nodded or waved as I passed. I had practically grown up in these rooms, after all. Dad was waiting in his office at the back, the same office where he had taught me to balance the books when I was 15, and where he'd lectured me about responsibility countless times over the years. The wood-paneled room, with its imposing desk and framed restaurant reviews, felt more like a principal's office than ever before. "Dennis," he said, barely looking up from some paperwork as I entered. "Sit down." I remained standing. "I'd rather hear what was so important that you needed to discuss it, but not important enough for anyone to show up yesterday." That got his attention. He put down his pen and leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "About that. We had Rosie's promotion celebration. It was scheduled weeks ago. Funny, I sent out invitations to my opening a month ago, called everyone personally 2 weeks ago. Not a single member of this family could find time to stop by, even for 10 minutes? Dad sighed, the sound heavy with disappointment that I recognized all too well. "Dennis, we need to be realistic here. This bakery, it's a phase, a rebellion. You're trying to prove something, and I understand that. But it's time to think about your future, your real future." "The bakery is my future," I said firmly. "It's not a phase or a rebellion. It's my passion, my career choice." "A career?" He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Baking cookies isn't a career for a man with a law degree. It's a hobby, at best. At worst, it's a complete waste of your potential." Before I could respond, the office door opened, and my mother walked in, followed closely by Rosie. Mom looked uncomfortable, her usual poise slightly diminished as her eyes darted between Dad and me. "I thought we agreed to discuss this as a family," she said to Dad, her voice carrying a hint of reproach. "We are," Dad replied. "I'm just getting to the point faster than you would." Mom turned to me, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dennis, we're concerned. Opening a business is risky even for people with experience. And to throw away your law career—" "I didn't throw anything away," I interrupted. "I chose a different path, one that actually makes me happy." Rosie, who had been leaning against the wall with arms crossed, finally spoke. "While you're playing baker, some of us are taking the family business seriously. Dad's made me general manager. I'll be handling day-to-day operations now." There was something in her tone, a mixture of smugness and resentment, that made it clear this wasn't just about my career choice. This was about the attention, the approval she was finally getting now that I had stepped away. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it despite everything. "You'll do a great job." She seemed taken aback by my sincerity, her defensive posture faltering slightly. The door opened again, and Jake slipped in, giving me an apologetic look as he took a seat in the corner. At 24, he was the youngest, and had always been caught in the middle of family tensions. "Now that everyone's here," Dad said, leaning forward, "let me be clear about what's going to happen. Dennis, I've given this a lot of thought. You have two options. Option 1. You sell that bakery, come back to the family, and we use your legal background to expand Crawford's. We've been considering opening a second location, and your skills would be valuable." "And option 2? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like it. "Option 2 is you continue with this. Experiment. But understand that if you choose that path, you're on your own. No financial support, no connections through our restaurant suppliers, and no guarantee that there will be a place for you here if it fails, which, statistically speaking, it likely will within the year." The room fell silent. Mom looked down at her hands. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Only Rosie maintained eye contact with me, her expression challenging. "That's not a discussion," I finally said. "That's an ultimatum." "Call it what you want," Dad replied, "but those are your options." I looked around the room at my family. Mom, who had always deferred to Dad's judgment in all important matters. Rosie, who had worked her entire life for Dad's approval and was finally getting it. Jake, who seemed torn between family loyalty and supporting my choices. "I opened that bakery because it's what I love," I said quietly. "I'm good at it. I'm proud of what I've created. And I was hoping foolishly, apparently, that my family might be proud of me too, even if it wasn't the path you chose for me." "We want what's best for you," Mom said softly. "No," I corrected her. "You want what Dad thinks is best for me, what fits with his vision of the Crawford legacy." Dad's face hardened. "You're being childish, Dennis. This isn't about legacy, it's about common sense. The restaurant business is brutal. Most new places fail. If you want to throw away everything we've given you, that's your choice. But don't expect us to fund your failure or clean up the mess afterward." The conversation devolved from there. Voices raised, old grievances surfaced. Mom tried to play peacemaker but lacked the conviction to stand against Dad. Rosie sided with our father at every turn, occasionally throwing in a comment about responsibility and family duty. Jake remained silent throughout, eyes downcast. After 30 minutes of circular arguments, I'd had enough. I stood up abruptly, interrupting Dad mid-sentence. "I didn't come here for permission or approval. I came because I thought there might be a chance for understanding. Clearly, I was wrong." I walked out, ignoring Dad's commands to come back and my mother's softer pleas to calm down. The dining room was still bustling as I strode through it, forcing myself to maintain composure until I reached the parking lot. Once in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, too angry to drive immediately. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "I'm sorry about all that. Your bakery is awesome, by the way. I wanted to come yesterday, but Dad made sure we were all at Rosie's thing." The message took some of the edge off my anger, but the sense of betrayal remained. My family had drawn a line, and I was on the wrong side of it. If I wanted to pursue my dream, I would have to do it without their support, financial, emotional, or otherwise. As I finally started the car and pulled away from Crawford's, I made a promise to myself. I would make Flour and Heart succeed, not just to prove my father wrong, but to prove to myself that I had made the right choice. The first month after the confrontation with my family brought a harsh reality check. Running a bakery wasn't just about creating delicious pastries, it was about inventory management, staff scheduling, equipment maintenance, and 1,000 other details I was learning on the fly. Without the safety net of family support, every decision carried weight. Financial challenges emerged quickly. The startup costs had been higher than anticipated, and daily operations consumed cash flow faster than I'd projected. I found myself working 16-hour days, coming in at 3 in the morning to begin baking and staying until closing to cut costs on staff. "You can't keep this pace up," Alex warned one evening as we cleaned the kitchen. "You'll burn out within weeks, not months." "What choice do I have?" I asked, scrubbing a stubborn spot on the industrial mixer. "We need to establish ourselves before we can afford more help." Alex gave me a concerned look but didn't argue further. He understood the precarious position we were in, having been through bakery startups before. Competition in the area was fierce. Within a 10-block radius, there were 3 established bakeries and 2 coffee shops that offered pastries. Each had loyal customers and refined operations. We were the newcomers, fighting for every sale. But the real blow came 3 weeks after opening, when our flour supplier suddenly canceled our account. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford," the representative said over the phone. "We've had to make some adjustments to our client list. Unfortunately, we can no longer service your establishment." "Is there a problem with our payment? Our order volume?" I pressed. "No, sir. It's just a business decision." I knew better. Crawford's had used the same supplier for decades. My father's influence was written all over this. Finding a new supplier meant paying higher prices, cutting further into our already thin margins. Then the same thing happened with our dairy vendor and our fruit supplier. "It's sabotage," Alex said bluntly after the third cancellation. "Someone's making calls." I didn't need to say who that someone was. By the 6-week mark, I was surviving on 4 hours of sleep per night. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under my eyes, and I had lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. The bakery was gaining customers, but not quickly enough to offset the increased costs from new suppliers. On a particularly difficult Tuesday afternoon, with rain keeping customer traffic light, a woman in her 30s with curly red hair and a notebook came in. She ordered a cappuccino and our signature cardamom twist pastry, then settled at a corner table. I noticed her taking notes and occasionally snapping photos with her phone. After she finished her pastry with visible enjoyment, I was pleased to note she approached the counter. "Excuse me, are you the owner?" "Yes, Dennis Crawford," I replied, extending my hand. "Sarah Jenkins. I write a food blog called Boston Bites. This place is a find. How long have you been open?" We chatted for nearly 20 minutes during the slow period. Sarah asked thoughtful questions about my background, my inspiration, and the journey to opening Flower and Heart. It was the first time someone had shown genuine interest in the story behind the bakery. "Would you mind if I featured you in my blog? I think my readers would love to hear about a lawyer who traded briefs for bread." It was the first piece of good news in weeks. Sarah's blog had a substantial following in the Boston area food scene. Her offer felt like the first break in the clouds. "I'd be honored," I told her sincerely. After Sarah left, promising to return, the bell above the door jingled again. I looked up to see my grandmother Eliza standing there, elegantly dressed as always, her silver hair neatly styled. "Grandma?" I nearly dropped the tray I was holding. She smiled, her eyes taking in every detail of the bakery. "So this is where you've been hiding. It's lovely, Dennis." I hurried around the counter to hug her, suddenly aware of how much I had missed her presence. "What are you doing here? Does Dad know you're here?" She waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need William's permission to see my grandson. Besides, I wanted to see this place for myself." I gave her a tour, showing off the kitchen, the display cases, explaining our daily baking schedule and best-selling items. She asked insightful questions, her years of restaurant experience evident. After the tour, we sat at a table with tea and fresh scones. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. "The family situation is quite the mess," she said directly, stirring honey into her tea. "William is being stubborn, but then, that's hardly news." I sighed. "He's actively trying to sabotage the bakery, Grandma. Our suppliers keep dropping us." Her eyes narrowed. "Is he now? That's crossing a line." "It's not just that. No one came to the opening. They all went to Rosie's promotion party instead." Grandma reached across the table to pat my hand. "I know, dear. I should have been here. I'm sorry about that. It's not your fault. Perhaps not, but I understand how it feels. Did you know that when your grandfather and I first opened Crawford's, my parents refused to come to the opening? They thought a restaurant was beneath our family's dignity." I stared at her in surprise. "I never knew that." "Oh yes. They wanted me to marry a doctor or lawyer, not a chef with big dreams and empty pockets. We struggled terribly those first few years. Thomas worked 18-hour days. I managed the books, hosted, waited tables, whatever was needed. What changed?" Her eyes crinkled with the memory. "Success, dear. Nothing silences critics like success. And eventually, they came around. My father became our biggest champion once he saw what we had built." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. It's not much, but it should help with some expenses." I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Consider it an investment, if your pride won't let you take a gift. I believe in what you're doing here, Dennis. The pastries are exquisite, by the way. Your cinnamon morning buns remind me of the ones I used to make." After she left, I opened the envelope to find $5,000 in cash. I sat down hard on a nearby chair, overwhelmed by her generosity and support. The next day brought another surprise. Sarah's blog post about Flower and Heart went live, featuring gorgeous photos of our products and a warmly written profile that emphasized both the quality of our baked goods and the personal story behind the bakery. From courtroom to kitchen, how one lawyer found his true calling in flour and sugar, read the headline. Within hours, our social media mentions exploded. By afternoon, we had a line out the door. Alex and I scrambled to keep up with demand, baking additional batches as quickly as possible. "What happened?" Lily asked as she rang up customer after customer. "We got noticed," I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. That evening after we closed, exhausted but exhilarated from the busy day, I received a text from Jake. "Saw that blog post about the bakery. Place looked amazing. Dad saw it too." I stared at those last 4 words, wondering what they meant. Had the article changed anything, or had it simply added fuel to the fire? The answer would come sooner than I expected. 3 months after opening, Flower and Heart had found its rhythm. Sarah's blog post had generated sustained interest, and we had a growing base of regular customers who came in daily for their morning pastry or lunchtime sandwich. We weren't profitable yet, but we were trending in the right direction. I had hired 2 more staff members, Diana, a recent culinary school graduate, and Pete, a college student with barista experience. With the additional help, I was finally able to sleep more than 4 hours a night and occasionally take a day off. Then, one Tuesday morning, Alex called me at home, his voice tense. "Dennis, you need to get down here now. There's something you should see." When I arrived at the bakery, Alex pointed across the street. A new storefront was being renovated, with workers installing fixtures and equipment. A sign in the window read, "Coming soon, Crawford Family Bakery." I stared in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." "It gets worse," Alex said, handing me a flyer. "These were distributed throughout the neighborhood yesterday." The flyer announced the grand opening of Crawford Family Bakery, emphasizing their 3 generations of food service excellence and offering opening week specials designed to undercut our prices by nearly 50%. At the bottom was a thinly veiled dig. "Quality baked goods from experienced professionals, not hobbyists." "This is a direct attack," I muttered, crumpling the flyer. "He's trying to put us out of business." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched with growing anger as the competing bakery took shape. The sign was professionally mounted, the interior visible through the windows looking upscale and polished. My father had clearly invested significant capital in the venture. Sarah called me when she heard the news. "This is getting ugly, Dennis. Word is spreading about the family drama behind these competing bakeries." "What are people saying?" "Some think it's fascinating, a family food feud. Others are taking sides. I've had readers ask me if I'm going to review the new place when it opens." "Will you?" I couldn't help asking. "Of course. I have to maintain objectivity. But Dennis, you should know your story has resonated with people. There's something compelling about someone risking everything to follow their passion." Her words provided small comfort as the Crawford Family Bakery's opening day approached. I tried to focus on our products and customers, but the stress was taking a toll. I found myself checking their progress multiple times daily, watching as their equipment was delivered, their signage perfected. The day before their scheduled opening, I was walking home when I spotted a familiar figure exiting the new bakery. Jake, my own brother. I crossed the street without thinking, calling his name. He froze, looking like a deer in headlights. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. Jake glanced around nervously. "Dennis, it's not what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're working for Dad's attempt to put me out of business." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he'd had since childhood when caught doing something wrong. He didn't give me a choice. He said either I help with the new bakery or I'm cut off too. "I need the money for grad school, Dennis." The betrayal stung, even though I understood his position. "Does it bother you at all, being part of this?" "Of course it does. I hate it. But what am I supposed to do? Dad's on a warpath. He's obsessed with proving you made a mistake. By ensuring I fail? That's twisted, Jake." "I know, but there's more." He lowered his voice. "He hired a professional pastry chef from New York. They've been reverse engineering your recipes, trying to figure out what makes your stuff so good." I shook my head in disgust. So he's not even creating something original. He's just trying to copy what I've built and use the Crawford name to steal my customers. Jake looked miserable. I'm sorry, Dennis. I really am. After he left, I stood staring at the new bakery Fury building inside me. This wasn't business competition, this was personal. My father was trying to crush me, to force me back into the fold on his terms. The Crawford family bakery opened with significant fanfare. They offered free samples, dramatic discounts, and even had a local morning show feature them. I watched from across the street as customers lined up to try their offerings. Within days, we noticed a dip in our business. Not dramatic, but concerning. Customers would mention the new place, some apologetically explaining they were just curious about it. Others started comparing our products directly, sometimes in earshot of other patrons. Then the rumors started. A customer mentioned hearing that we used artificial ingredients. Another asked if it was true we weren't properly licensed. The whispers were too coordinated to be coincidental. They're spreading lies about us, Alex confirmed after speaking with a regular who had stopped coming. Telling people we cut corners on ingredients, that you have no real training. I was furious, but determined not to sink to their level. We keep doing what we've been doing. Quality speaks for itself. But the campaign was effective. After 2 weeks of the Crawford family bakery's operation, our sales were down 20%. At that rate, we wouldn't survive 6 months. One evening, after a particularly slow day, I was alone cleaning up when I heard a crash from the back alley. I rushed outside to find our dumpster overturned, trash scattered everywhere, and a spray-painted message on our back wall, "Amateur Hour." As I stood there, surveying the mess, something inside me snapped. I had endured the family rejection, the supplier sabotage, the competing business. But this petty vandalism crossed a line. I stormed across the street, not caring that Crawford Family Bakery was still open with customers inside. Jake was behind the counter and paled when he saw me. "Where's Dad?" I demanded. "He's not here." "Dennis, you shouldn't." "Who did this?" I showed him a photo of the vandalism on my phone. "Was it you? One of his hired goons?" Jake looked genuinely shocked. "What? No. Dennis, I wouldn't do that." A few customers were watching now, the drama more interesting than the pastries. Then who? Because someone just vandalized my property, and the timing is pretty convenient for this place. An older man emerged from the back, wearing a chef's coat with head baker embroidered on it. "Is there a problem here? Are you the one my father hired to copy my recipes? How's that working out for you?" The man looked confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. I develop all our recipes myself." Jake pulled me aside, speaking urgently. "Dennis, you need to leave. Now, this isn't helping anything." "Nothing helps," I hissed back. "Dad is determined to destroy everything I've built. He won't be satisfied until I'm crawling back, admitting he was right all along." Jake didn't deny it. His silence was confirmation enough. I left, feeling eyes on my back. The confrontation had accomplished nothing except possibly making me look unhinged to potential customers. But the anger had needed an outlet, and now that it had escaped, a cold determination took its place. When I returned to Flower and Heart, Sarah was waiting outside. "I heard there was trouble. Are you okay?" I didn't ask how she knew. News traveled fast in the food community. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm not okay. My own father is trying to put me out of business and he's fighting dirty." Sarah followed me inside as I explained everything. The vandalism, the rumors, Jake's involvement. She listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "This is about more than business," she finally said. "This is about control." "It always has been," I admitted. "Dad can't stand that I chose my own path. He'd rather see me fail spectacularly than succeed on my terms." "What are you going to do?" I looked around at the bakery, my bakery, the warm yellow walls, the carefully arranged display cases, the kitchen where I had finally found my calling. I thought about my grandmother's words. "Nothing silences critics like success." "I'm going to fight back," I said, "but my way, not his." That night, I called Alex, Sarah, and my staff for an emergency meeting at the bakery. As they gathered around our biggest work table, I laid out the situation in stark terms. We're under attack. Crawford Family Bakery isn't just a competitor, it's a deliberate attempt to drive us out of business. We have two choices: give up or fight harder than we ever have. "I'm in," Alex said immediately. Those copycats couldn't create an original recipe if their lives depended on it. One by one, everyone voiced their support. Even Diana, who had only been with us a few weeks, was adamant. This place is special. What we make here is special. I'm not letting some family vendetta ruin it. Together, we developed a plan. New signature items that couldn't be easily copied. Special events to bring in customers. Community outreach. A loyalty program to reward our regulars. But the most important decision I made that night was to stop running from the conflict. It was time to face my family directly and end this feud once and for all. After our emergency meeting, I spent the next week preparing for a confrontation with my family. It wasn't just about defending my business anymore, it was about standing up for myself in a way I never had before. First, I gathered evidence. Sarah helped me document the suspicious timing of supplier cancellations. Alex compiled notes from customers who had mentioned specific rumors being spread about our ingredients or practices. I even had Jake secretly record a conversation where my father explicitly stated his intention to put that bakery out of business. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Sarah asked as we finalized our preparations. "Once you confront them this way, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I replied, more certain than I'd been about anything. "This has gone on long enough." I chose Thursday evening for my visit to Crawford's, knowing the family would be gathered for their weekly dinner meeting. When I arrived, the hostess knew since my departure didn't recognize me. "I'm here to see William Crawford," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "Mr. Crawford is in a private dinner. Tell him his son is here." Her eyes widened slightly with recognition. "Oh, you're Dennis. I'll let him know you're here." 5 minutes later, I was escorted to the private dining room where my family gathered weekly to discuss restaurant business. The conversation stopped abruptly when I entered. Dad sat at the head of the table, Mom and Rosie to his right, Jake to his left. An empty chair, my old seat, remained unoccupied. "What are you doing here?" Dad asked, his tone cold. "We need to talk. All of us." I remained standing, refusing the implied invitation to take my old place at the table. "We're in the middle of a meeting," Rosie said. "Perfect. This concerns Crawford business. Specifically, the new Crawford Family Bakery and its mission to destroy flour and heart." Dad's expression didn't change, but Mom looked down at her plate, uncomfortable. Jake fidgeted with his napkin. "If your little bakery can't handle competition, that's hardly our problem," Dad said dismissively. "Competition is one thing. What you're doing is sabotage." I placed a folder on the table, pressuring suppliers to drop me, spreading false rumors about our products, vandalizing my property. "This goes beyond business, and you know it." "That's a serious accusation," Dad said, not touching the folder. "Do you have any proof?" "Yes, actually. Including a recording of you telling Jake your intention was to put me out of business." I nodded to my brother, whose face had gone pale. "You recorded me?" Dad turned to Jake, betrayal written across his features. Before Jake could respond, the door opened, and Grandma Eliza walked in. "What's she doing here?" Dad asked, clearly caught off guard. "I invited her," I said. "Since we're discussing family business." Grandma took a seat at the opposite end of the table from Dad, creating a second power position. "Hello, William, Catherine, children. I understand there's a situation that needs resolution." "Mother, this doesn't concern you," Dad said stiffly. "A Crawford trying to destroy another Crawford's business? I think that concerns me very much." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything that had happened. The supplier cancellations, the rumors, the vandalism, the copycat recipes. Mom looked increasingly distressed. Rosie shifted between defensive and uncomfortable. Jake confirmed the parts he had witnessed firsthand. "Did you know about the vandalism?" Mom finally asked Dad, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course not," he replied, but there was a hesitation that everyone noticed. "You've gone too far, William," Grandma Eliza said. "This isn't how I raised you." "I'm protecting our family legacy," Dad insisted. Dennis turned his back on everything we built. "No," I interrupted. "I chose a different path, but I carried our values with me. Quality, integrity, hard work, everything you taught me. The only difference is I'm applying those values to pastries instead of steaks." "He's right, Dad," Jake said quietly. "What we're doing with the new bakery, it's wrong. We're not creating anything original. We're just trying to copy Flour and Heart and use the Crawford name to steal their customers." Dad's face flushed with anger. "You too, Jake? After everything I've done for you? That's exactly the problem, I said. You see support as something to be earned through obedience, not something freely given out of love. The room fell silent. Even Dad seemed taken aback by the directness of my statement. Grandma Eliza broke the silence. William, do you remember why your father opened Crawford's in the first place? Dad looked confused by the question. To create a successful business, of course. No. He opened it because his father forced him to give up his dream of becoming a musician. Thomas swore he would create his own path, one where he could find joy in his work. She looked around the table. Your father has forgotten that part of our story, it seems. Dad's expression changed, a flicker of something recognition, perhaps crossing his features. Is that true? I asked, looking between Dad and Grandma. Thomas was a gifted pianist, Grandma confirmed. His father owned a factory and expected Thomas to take over. When Thomas refused, he was cut off entirely. We struggled for years before the restaurant succeeded. I turned to Dad. So you're doing to me exactly what was done to Grandpa, the very thing that made him start Crawford's in the first place. The irony hung heavy in the air. Dad's jaw worked, but no words came out. William, Mom said gently, reaching for his hand. This has to stop. Dennis is our son. His bakery is beautiful, and his products are wonderful. We should be proud of him, not trying to destroy what he's built. I agree, Rosie said, surprising everyone. When we all turned to look at her, she shrugged. What? I never wanted the bakery to happen, but now that I've seen it, it's impressive, and the reviews are amazing. People love it. You've been to Flower and Heart? I asked, astonished. Rosie looked slightly embarrassed. A few times. In disguise, your lemon tarts are incredible. The admission broke some of the tension in the room. Even Dad's rigid posture seemed to soften slightly. I'm not asking for your blessing anymore, I said, addressing my father directly. I'm telling you that this vendetta ends now. Close Crawford Family Bakery. Stop interfering with my suppliers. Stop spreading rumors. Let me succeed or fail on my own merits. And if I refuse, Dad challenged, though with less conviction than before, then I go public with everything. Sarah's blog reaches thousands of food enthusiasts in Boston. How do you think they'll react to learning that the respected Crawford's restaurant is engaging in these tactics against a small, independent bakery? Against the owner's son, no less? It was a hardball tactic, one that risked damaging the family business. But I was done being pushed around. Dad looked to Mom, then to Grandma Eliza. Whatever he saw in their expressions must have told him he was outnumbered. Fine, he said finally. The bakery will close. The rest of this interference will stop. Thank you, I said simply. But, he continued, I want something in return. I tensed, waiting for the catch. Crawford's has been looking for a new supplier for desserts. Our current pastry chef is leaving next month. I want Flower and Heart to provide our dessert menu. Exclusive items, created specifically for the restaurant. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't an apology, but it was. An olive branch, a business proposition that acknowledged the quality of my work. I'll need to think about it, I said, unwilling to agree to anything in the heat of the moment. Dad nodded, accepting my response. Take your time. The offer stands. As the meeting broke up, Jake pulled me aside. I'm sorry for everything, Dennis. For not standing up to Dad sooner. For working at that bakery. You were in a tough position, I acknowledged. But I could use help at Flower and Heart, if you're interested. Real help. Not spying for Dad. Jake's face lit up. Seriously? But I don't know anything about baking. You can learn. I did. Later that evening, as I left Crawford's, Grandma Eliza walked me to my car. You did well in there, she said, standing your ground without burning bridges. I learned from the best, I replied, giving her a side hug. Thank you for coming. For telling that story about Grandpa. I had no idea. Family histories have a way of repeating themselves unless we learn from them. Your father forgot that lesson. I'm glad you reminded him. The next morning, I arrived at Flower and Heart to find the Coming Soon sign removed from Crawford Family Bakery's window. By afternoon, workers were dismantling the interior. Dad had wasted no time honoring our agreement. When I shared the news with my staff, the relief was palpable. Alex proposed a toast with coffee mugs. To standing up to bullies, even when they're family, he said. And to making peace when possible, I added. Sarah stopped by later with news. Social media is buzzing about Crawford Family Bakery closing before it even opened. People are speculating wildly. Let them speculate, I said. The important thing is we can focus on our work now, not on fighting a family vendetta. She studied my face. You seem different, more settled. I feel different. For the first time since opening this place, I'm not looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next attack. I can just bake. Over the following weeks, a new normal began to take shape. Jake started working at Flower and Heart 2 days a week, learning the basics. He had a natural talent for customer service, remembering names and preferences effortlessly. I considered Dad's offer carefully before accepting with modifications. Flower and Heart would provide desserts for Crawford's, but not exclusively. The arrangement would be a regular supplier relationship, not an ownership stake or merger. To my surprise, Dad agreed without argument. The first order, a selection of seasonal tarts and a signature sourdough bread pudding, was delivered personally by me. The restaurant's chef received me warmly, having always been kind during my childhood years hanging around the kitchen. As I was leaving, I ran into Rosie in the hallway. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation. "The pastry chef tried your tarts," she said. "He's impressed. Said they're better than anything he could have created." Coming from Rosie, this was high praise. "Thanks. How are things here?" "Good. Busy. Dad's been different. Less rigid. He even asked for my input on the new menu concept." I raised my eyebrows. "Really? That's new." She nodded. "I think your confrontation shook something loose in him, made him reconsider some things." It wasn't a full reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a start, a foundation we could build on, one honest conversation at a time. 6 months after the confrontation at Crawford's, Flower and Heart celebrated its 1-year anniversary. What a difference half a year had made. We had expanded our staff to 7 people. Our customer base had grown steadily, with lines out the door on weekend mornings. The partnership with Crawford's had introduced our desserts to a new audience, many of whom sought out the bakery afterward. Jake had become a fixture at Flower and Heart, working 3 days a week while finishing his business degree. He had a knack for operations that complemented my focus on product development. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" he asked one morning as we prepared for opening. "About the second location?" I nodded, piping cream into eclairs. "I'm considering it. The space on Newberry Street is perfect, and the numbers make sense. But it's a big step." "A big step in the right direction," he insisted. "The demand is there, Dennis. We're turning down catering requests weekly because we don't have the capacity. We'll talk about it at the staff meeting tomorrow," I promised. The bakery had evolved significantly from my original vision. What began as a small operation focused on bread and morning pastries had expanded to include lunch service, special occasion cakes, and a growing catering business. Each addition had come organically, responding to customer requests and market opportunities. Sarah had continued to champion Flower and Heart in her blog, documenting our growth and featuring our seasonal specialties. Her latest post had highlighted our anniversary celebration, including a quote from me reflecting on the journey. "The past year has taught me that success isn't just about having a good product," I had told her. "It's about building a community around what you do. Our customers aren't just buying bread or pastries. They're becoming part of our story." The afternoon of our anniversary celebration, I was surprised to see my mother walk through the door. Since the confrontation, she had ordered by phone a few times, but had never visited in person. "Mom," I greeted her, wiping flour from my hands. "This is unexpected." She looked around, taking in the warm yellow walls, the bustling counter area, the happy customers at their tables. "It's lovely, Dennis. Even nicer than I imagined." "Thank you. Would you like a tour?" I showed her the kitchen, introduced her to the staff, explained our production schedule. She asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the operation. Over coffee and pastries afterward, she said, "Your father would like to come to the anniversary celebration tonight. If that's all right with you." I hesitated. Dad and I had established a cordial business relationship, but we hadn't fully reconciled on a personal level. Our conversations remained mostly transactional, focused on the dessert orders for Crawford's. "It's your celebration," Mom added quickly. "If you'd rather he didn't..." "No, it's fine," I decided. "He's welcome to come. The whole family is. That evening, Flower and Heart was transformed for the celebration. Strings of lights hung from the ceiling, tables were pushed back to create mingling space, and displays of our most popular items lined the walls. We had created a special anniversary menu featuring both customer favorites and new creations. Alex managed the food service while I greeted guests. Local business owners, regular customers, and food writers mingled together, creating a buzz of conversation and laughter. When my family arrived, I felt a momentary tightness in my chest. Dad looked uncomfortable but determined. Mom guided him forward with a gentle hand on his back. Rosie followed, along with Jake, who had already been helping set up earlier. "Congratulations," Dad said formally, extending his hand. "The place looks successful." I shook his hand, noting the effort it took him to be here. "Thank you. I'm glad you could come." Grandma Liza arrived moments later, immediately drawing attention with her elegant presence. She embraced me warmly. "I knew you could do it, Dennis. I'm so proud of you." The family dispersed throughout the party. Mom chatted with Sarah, who was documenting the event for her blog. Rosie examined the displays with a professional eye, occasionally nodding in approval. Jake worked the room like a natural host, introducing our regular customers to my family members. Dad stood somewhat apart, watching it all with an unreadable expression. After a while, I approached him with a plate of assorted pastries. "You should try these. They're some of our best sellers." He accepted the plate, trying a bite of almond croissant. His eyebrows rose slightly. "This is exceptional." "Thanks. That one took me 37 attempts to get right." 37? He seemed surprised by the precision. I kept track. Alex thought I was crazy, but the lamination had to be perfect. Dad nodded slowly. "Your grandfather was the same way with his sauces, refused to serve them until they were exactly right." It was the first time he had ever compared me to Grandpa Thomas in a positive way. The significance wasn't lost on either of us. "I may have misjudged some things," he said after a long moment, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "About the bakery, about your decision." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was monumental. "Thank you for saying that. The desserts you've been providing to Crawfords have been very well received. Sales of dessert courses are up 23% since we started featuring your items." I smiled at his typical approach, measuring reconciliation in business metrics. "I'm glad to hear it. We've been working on some new seasonal items for the fall menu. I look forward to trying them." He glanced around the bustling bakery again. "You've built something worthwhile here, Dennis. Something with your own stamp on it." The acknowledgement meant more than I wanted to admit. That was the goal. Later in the evening, I clinked a glass to gather everyone's attention for a brief speech. As the room quieted, I found myself looking at the journey that had brought us to this moment. A year ago, I opened these doors with no idea what to expect. I just knew I loved baking and wanted to create a place where I could share that passion with others. The road hasn't always been smooth. My eyes briefly met my father's across the room. There were times when I questioned everything, when failure seemed not just possible but inevitable. I acknowledged each staff member by name, thanking them for their contributions. I thanked Sarah for her support and advocacy, and then I turned to my family. I also want to thank my family, who are all here tonight. We've had our differences, light laughter rippled through the room at the understatement, but we're finding our way back to each other. I've learned that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most worthwhile destinations. After the speech, as guests resumed mingling, Dad approached me again. "Have you given any thought to expansion? Jake's been pushing for a second location. We've found a potential space on Newbury Street." He nodded thoughtfully. "It's a good area, high foot traffic. You'd need to adjust your product mix for that demographic." That's what I was thinking. More grab-and-go items, fewer full-sized loaves. If you need any advice on lease negotiations, I'd be happy to review the terms. The offer surprised me. I'd appreciate that, actually. We weren't fully reconciled, but we had found common ground, a shared language of business that allowed us to rebuild our relationship gradually, on new terms. It wasn't the unquestioning approval I had once craved, but it was something more valuable: respect between equals. 2 weeks after the anniversary celebration, I invited Grandma Eliza to the bakery for a special baking session. With the shop closed for the day, we had the kitchen to ourselves. "What are we making?" she asked, tying on an apron. I pulled out a worn recipe card. "Your cinnamon rolls. the ones you used to make on Sunday mornings." Her face lit up with recognition. "Oh my, I haven't made these in years." Together, we worked the dough, our hands falling into a rhythm as natural as breathing. I had modernized some aspects of the bakery's operations, but the tactile connection to the ingredients, the passing of knowledge between generations, remained timeless. "You know," she said as we waited for the dough to rise, "Thomas would have loved this place. He always believed food was about more than nourishment. It was about connection." "I wish I had known him better," I admitted. "He passed when I was so young." "He lives on in this," she said, gesturing to our flour-dusted hands, "in the care you take with everything you create, in the joy you find in feeding others." As we shaped the rolls and prepared the glaze, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had left behind a prestigious career, confronted my family's disapproval, and faced deliberate sabotage, all to pursue something that called to me on a profound level. The lessons had been hard-won but invaluable. That true satisfaction comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from honoring your own authentic path. That standing up for yourself doesn't necessarily mean burning bridges. That sometimes the people who hurt you most are themselves acting from old wounds. When the cinnamon rolls emerged from the oven, golden and fragrant, we sat together at a small table by the window to enjoy them with coffee. "To the future of flour and heart," Grandma toasted, raising her mug. "And to family," I added, "in all its complicated glory." The next morning, as I opened the bakery for regular business, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for much of my life. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Business would always bring new challenges, and family relationships would require ongoing care. But I had found my footing, my voice, my place. As I turned the sign to open and the first customers of the day entered, I greeted them with genuine warmth. This was where I belonged, creating food that nourished both body and spirit, building a community one pastry at a time. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is simply to be yourself in a world that expects something different. And sometimes, the family that initially rejects your choices can eventually become your strongest supporters once they see the authentic joy that comes from following your true path. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and following your passion? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found my journey inspiring, subscribe for more stories about finding your own path, and share with anyone who might need encouragement to follow their dreams. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, the most delicious life is the one that's authentically yours.